Godzilla!
It looks like Godzilla, but due to international copyright laws, it's not.
Still, we should run like it is Godzilla!
Though it isn't.
Hello everyone, today I want to talk about Godzilla Singular Point, which came out in 2021. However, just like with Pacific Rim the Black, I need to lay some ground rules. First of all, you need to understand that this is the first anime that came out about Godzilla. Well, I mean, after original trilogy, which had good ideas, I gotta admit, but that's about it. This is all gonna be important because you'll see that the creators of the anime tried to fit a lot. As a result, they had a product which is, not gonna lie, was an insanely cool watch, but I'm gonna say that a lot of scenes were questionable. Let's get into it right away. I tried to explain everything to the best I can, because actually a lot of reviews I've read were saying that the anime is cool, but they cannot understand what the hell is happening. So, I'm gonna try to explain it. Anyhow, the anime starts on a really confusing point. In the center of the plot, we have some unknown Indian music that is literally broadcasted from God knows where. At the same time, we're introduced to two of the main characters, Yoon and Mei, who are so far working separately, both at the companies who are trying to figure out where is this music coming from. Yeah, story basically starts because several scientists have nothing else to do apparently except tracking a random radio signal. To be completely honest, the first episode of the anime is like okay at the best. Like, yeah, it's not terribly animated, everything's pretty smooth, but there's not much happening, really. For the most part, we're just learning about the main characters. Mei works for some kind of professor, this guy who I don't really care about works in the cable company, they realize that the signal is going from under the ground. Yoon apparently literally invented ChatGPT, and I'm not even joking. Literally out of all of them, only this grandpa is doing something useful. Bro is literally living the dream, building his own mechas in a garage. Only at the very end of the episode, we actually get a really interesting hook and jumpstart of the whole action. The government guys reveal the skeleton of the Godzilla that was defeated somewhere in the 80s or whatever by the military of Japan. At the same time, on the surface, the continent is invaded by a flock of flying kaijus who are... Okay, I do want to admit that the monsters in the anime don't have to look like incredibly unique, but what are those Jurassic World looking guys?
Like the dinosaur.
Yeah, sure, the characters later show us the drawings from ancient times where humanity already encountered those monsters along with Godzilla, but I don't know, the designs still feel a little lazy. It's like, imagine if instead of Godzilla, like, you know, the actual iconic design who looks like a kaiju, we would have had just a giant T-Rex painted purple. Like, I feel like it would have been a little off, right? In addition to that, for the most part, monsters are gonna appear in 3D, and if the mecha, for example, which is also in 3D, looks fine, the monsters, like, I guess look fine for the most part, until they interact with the 2D characters, and you can clearly see the animation difference.
Now, I don't want you to be alarmed, girls, but I think that's a dinosaur behind you.
Before we get into the rest of the story, I do want to point out that it's not exactly clear if this whole shenanigans with monsters is typical for this world or not. Because Mei straight up mentions that she studies paranormal activity, and we see various characters who also supposedly don't see anything wrong with the monsters. The general public, however, is kinda surprised by the existing of those dinosaurs. They surprised because it's some mythical creature that is not supposed to exist. Because of all of this, I don't understand if people in this world are aware of paranormal activity, or they just don't care. There's even a scene where C changes color to red and nobody seems to care. Wait a minute, C changes color to red? That should have been your first sign that something terrible is coming. Do you not watch Evangelion?
You idiots!
Anyway, the characters are realizing that the kaijus are attracted to radio sounds and high-frequency sounds in general. As such, they want to lead them away from town by using antenna on their bike. But the funniest part's while the characters risk their necks, Mei was just on a train chilling. Yes, it legitimately feels like some ironic next-level comedy, because while Yoon is trying to lead monsters away from town, sacrificing himself, Mei is just in the train talking to ChatGPT. She's not even concerned, really, by the apocalypse. Like, literally, all she's concerned about is that her clothes might get dirty. You know, the clothes that she left in her apartment. I'm not even joking, that's an actual conversation she has with an AI. Like, bruh, boys adventure, meanwhile, girls adventure, no shit. Oh, and by the way, if you're wondering, what was the main character's plan? Like, yes, they're leading monsters away from town, which is heroic and all, but what exactly is their plan? Like, they're gonna lead them away, and then what? Well, they don't know. Like, they actually do admit that this is a heroic sacrifice, and is kind of a irrational plan, but conveniently for them, monsters just self-destruct. Yes, those kaijus are apparently have like a time limit or whatever, or a really short lifespan, because after a while, they just die. To be completely honest, so far, even though anime feels a little slow-paced at the beginning, it started to get into more action, and I do like that. What's actually interesting is that in between episodes, we also get news reports, where we literally see what's happening outside of the main character's POV. Which is actually, I would say, is a really nice add to the plot, because if we just followed the main characters and only the main characters, it would have looked like there's nothing serious going on, because like I said, the main characters are only facing like a dozen of those kaijus so far, and like, it doesn't feel like the apocalypse. But in those news reports, we not only see the destruction that those kaijus have caused, but also mentions of the death that occurred. Which is all in all makes show more serious and the world more believable. The bigger problem is that, however, anime also mentions a lot of actual scientific things, again trying to play on the realism part, but that makes a lot of scenes actually incredibly boring. Yes, the scenes where action is happening or where the characters at least pretend like they're doing something important to the plot, that part is interesting to watch. But the scenes where the characters spend so much time, characters particularly Mei, which is especially upsetting, spend time talking about why kaijus look the way they act, how exactly do they fit in the animal kingdom, why are they big, all of the background characters talk about this like some cell or molecule that exists in the animal kingdom apparently that jump-started evolution of kaijus, and I'm listening to all of that and I'm like, bruh, these are giant monsters and their sole purpose in the plot is to destroy cities. I don't need to know why they're big. This is especially a problem because I remind you, the anime is called Godzilla. Like, it's about Godzilla, right? And so far, all of the actions we see are supposed to be a build-up to a Godzilla. We see that situation is getting worse and worse, and all of the monsters that are coming around supposed to signal that something way worse is coming. But instead of like panic in the cities, for example, or personal stories that involve main characters, we see a scientist discussing where this element comes from, which is basically this red dust. How many stages does it have? What scientific explanation does it have for being red, and etc. All while using incredibly long pseudoscientific words that prevent you from understanding what exactly are they talking about. Literally, they could have just said that all of the kaijus got to us through a wormhole along with this red dust, which is basically a home turf of their dimension. Since it's a parallel dimension and it's not supposed to make sense, they can control their own evolution, mutate, and see the future. Godzilla is literally their king and he's gonna terraform the planet to fit the kaiju standard so they can live normally. There, I just recap like a dozen of dialogues where the characters were mumbling trying to understand what the hell the kaijus are doing. And the biggest problem with that, I would have understood if they just went with the trope, we have no idea what's going on, we're supposed to figure out what is this red dust and what are kaijus. But no, right away plot goes into insanely convoluted way mentioning this guy who discovered red dust 50 years ago in some jellyfish. Using this red dust, he made a computer that can foresee future, but then this computer saw the Godzilla, but he didn't know it was Godzilla, it just looked like a cataclysm. And I would have understood if anime showed all of that via flashback, but no, Mei literally goes all over the world reading his diaries and trying to figure out what exactly he discovered, how did he saw future, like bruh, this is insanely convoluted for zero reasons. If you want to tell us that kaijus came from a parallel dimension, just go ahead and tell us. And it's even stupider because it's revealed that there's this group of scientists who knew most of this stuff already. I'm not even joking, later in the plot Mei gets invited into this like science convention with some other scientist where she's basically like, look everyone, I made a new element! Meanwhile, this presentation is sponsored by Donald Trump apparently, I don't know. Yeah, by the way, this element that looks like glass is the red dust, technically, just an earlier stage of it. And yeah, character's gonna spend several episodes trying to figure out why exactly it works that way, and I'm not gonna repeat the explanation because it's really convoluted. It involves this element existing in several dimensions at the same time, whatever. I'll get into the exact details in a minute. I suppose it is interesting that the main characters don't really interact most of the time except via chat. Like, yes, I did say that Mei and Yoon are the main characters, but they're essentially working on the same mystery throughout the whole anime while not interacting at all, except via chat. Yeah, the chat that was created by the Chat GPT, which is on both of their computers, but which is somehow two different programs. As a result, this chat is anonymous, and until the very end, they have no idea who they're talking to. Like, this is an interesting story device, but if you think about the world building, this whole Chat GPT story seems like insanely stupid. Let's actually talk a little more about that Chat GPT, because it's an insanely powerful AI. It's a computer that can do almost anything, up to mimicking humans, and at some point, one of the versions of it even becomes an actual person after they installed it into the mecha. And the funniest part, they say that Yoon just straight up made it, like, on his own, and then uploaded it into the internet where anyone can download it. But in the show, only Yoon and Mei were shown to have this AI, and nobody else is using it, but also nobody else is surprised that this supercomputer is just riding around solving mysteries. Like, the characters are literally lucky that the show didn't become this the second Mei installed this AI.
Well, I'm glad that didn't happen.
Anyhow, besides the kaiju that appear in the air, we now got few kaijus that appear on Earth, which actually have a more decent design. Yes, it still kinda looks like a dinosaur, but I can give it a pass because at least this one is more creative. If the first line of kaijus were pretty much just flying birds, this one is more interesting. This kaiju can move spikes on its back and that way dodge bullets, as the spikes themselves are pretty bulletproof. This piece of the world building, by the way, is interesting because we get a confirmation about how kaijus can see the future, and it actually works because we can see it and not hear it in a long, annoying monologue. Like I said, the kaijus are technically partially made out of this red dust, which exists at several dimensions at once. And since laws of physics in the kaiju dimension just kinda do whatever, it goes in and out of our dimension while consuming information and even light. To put it simply, kaijus know everything is going to happen to them, including the trajectory of the bullet, because the cells of red dust already were in the future of our dimension, then flew back into kaiju's dimension, and then flew back into the past of our dimension, to the moment where kaijus were shot. And again, I do love the absurdly nerdy explanation of why kaijus can dodge bullets, but at the same time, you could just say they can't deflect bullets, and no further explain it. Like, this insanely convoluted premise is both incredibly interesting and super boring. Because while watching this anime, I feel like I'm in a lecture or something. Okay, a little more about the story. I do actually think that build up to all of those kaijus is actually incredibly well done. Because at first, only one of those monsters show up at first. First one pterodactyl, and then one of those ankylosauruses. Which is a really good plot device, because we can see how dangerous they are, even if there's one of them. And then we realize that there's a whole bunch of them off screen, and they're just ready to attack. Again, that really works well for the world building and really builds up to the whole apocalypse theme. Oh, and by the way, the way they defeat the dinosaur is freaking hilarious. Since he deflects bullets, they just got a harpoon, like, insanely close to him, and then, like,
dodge this.
Anyhow, shortly after, in the 7th episode, we finally see Godzilla. And not gonna lie, build up to him was pretty interesting, especially when we learned that we actually saw him before that, but we didn't realize it was him because he was evolving. There are several stages of him shown in the anime, and only in the last one you realize it's Godzilla. But before we got into the final action with Godzilla, who is slowly destroying Tokyo, we focus a little bit on the main characters. They upgraded their mecha and give him a cool spear. Now he's also controlled by AI and he can conveniently deal with spider kaijus that showed up. Honestly, probably second most entertaining fight in the whole anime, because even though mecha can now one-shot those kaijus, because there's a whole hive of them, it becomes a pretty dynamic fight. After this fight, yep, you guessed right, back to discovering of the mystery. Turns out, the skeleton that we saw at the beginning of the anime, and the music that we also heard at the beginning of the anime, and that everyone kind of forgot about, is actually connected, because you see this skeleton is just alive. And I swear to you, don't ask me how, unless you want to hear another hour-long lecture about this anime. Oh, and by the way, this guy's just stealing the skeleton. And if you're wondering who that is, it's a character who had like 20 seconds of screen time. But to be honest, I can't even call him truly evil, really. He just wants to sell Skeleton of the Godzilla to the highest bidder. And then main character saw him do that. He then captured him, said his evil plan out loud, and then just left. Like, I'm not even joking, he didn't trap him in a cage, he didn't kill him, he just left him in the field.
And in that sense, he is truly a very dangerous man.
Basically, those scientists that knew about the end of the world in the prediction think that the end of the world, like the actual cataclysm and the apocalypse, is going to happen in a decade because of the prediction. But the guy who made the prediction and who discovered the red dust started working on a bomb years ago, which should crystallize all the red dust and destroy all the kaijus in the process. So, remember how I said that the red dust has different stages, 13 stages in fact. So, basically, yeah, the bomb can turn red dust into any of those stages. However, only one of the stages can actually prevent the apocalypse. So, in order to make sure the bomb actually does what it's supposed to do and stop the apocalypse and not just crystallize all the red dust, you need a certain code, because there's several codes that can be applied to this bomb, and each code basically does something different. Only they don't know the code because this guy either didn't tell him or didn't figure it out himself. Because of that, they've been trying to find the right code for like 20 years, but so far weren't successful. May, however, along with this Indian girl, who's my favorite character, by the way, and her father, were trying to prove that the cataclysm is going to happen right now, and that the actions need to be taken now, otherwise there's just gonna be no world to save. In order to do that, they went to the machine that predicts future, which is actually powered by the wormhole. They connected May's AI to it, because what's wrong is going to happen if you do that, right? Anyway, this AI sort of becomes omnipotent and travels back and forth in time. Meanwhile, all of the other scientists are destroyed by one of the kaijus, because, I mean, whatever, it's the last episode anyway. While the monster is getting towards the wormhole, characters were trying to find the code in the supercomputer that can see future, only they end up not finding it because the code doesn't yet exist. Bear with me here, because the plot is just gonna go out the freaking window. So they couldn't find the code for the bomb because it doesn't exist. Yes, instead they found the code that can make, and I'm not shitting you, that can make the mecha huge. And so the mecha becomes huge, and by the way, who has a voice of a 12-year-old? Starts fighting Godzilla. I am not joking! And remember how at the beginning I was joking that this whole thing might be just an ironic comedy? Well, I guess joke's on me. Anyway, to put it shortly, again, if I got all of the things right, the song has been going through all of those things and been caused by the machine that can see future, is the combination of two AIs, one which Yoon had and one which May uploaded into this future-telling computer. While all of this was happening, we even saw a scene where characters were traveling to Tokyo to face Godzilla, and randomly the computer inside of Mecha started updating. Because, like, this is the point in time from which the future piece of AI traveled back to its past self. And apparently, I feel losing IQ by the seconds, apparently combination of those two AI somehow makes the robot go huge. I don't even know what to say. I feel outplayed, outsmarted, defeated. I tried to understand this anime to make sense of its plot, of its story, but I failed. This anime has bested me in every way possible. But okay, one final push. In the end, the code for the bomb was the combination of those two AI. Like, the code for AI, that was the code for the bomb. It explodes and defeats Godzilla for good this time. The main characters are finally meet, and we get a really nice monologue of the AI telling us about the rights and the wrongs, the future and the past. I hope you enjoyed that video, because they took all of my brain cells. I'm gonna go eat something. Fish, I guess. I'll go cook some salmon. I need some brain food right now. Okay, jokes aside, in conclusion of this video, I suppose since this is partially an homage to all of those old Godzilla films, I can justify why the robot got big, right? Because it happened in those movies too. He was small, he becomes large, so he could fight the large monster. But unfortunately, this final fight, even though it was kinda epic, it lasted legitimately like a minute. Less than any other fight with kaijus. The Godzilla itself, even though he's in the title, I would say is fine. I would say there's the right amount of time with him, because he's not even supposed to be like an antagonist, but more of like a force of nature. Again, since Godzilla originally was supposed to be a metaphor for the atomic bomb, this analogy works quite well here. Characters. There is a lot of them. Most of them I didn't even remember, honestly. Like, literally 2 characters that stack out the most for me are the ones with, like, the most interesting designs. Main characters, I suppose, are memorable because we see them the most, but also because they have more or less a memorable personality. But that's only because everyone else have 0 personality, and they only do whatever plot needs them to do. The plot itself, I don't even know. It started well, it was going in an interesting direction, and then, just like the future that we're told about here, it got like all over the place, in every direction possible, and I don't even know what to make sense of it. Don't get me wrong, I loved it, but several scenes I was either falling asleep or I had to rewatch them to understand what the hell is going on. Tell me in the comments if you understood more than I do. If you, I don't know, give me a lot of likes, I will explain it in details if you want. I'll lose the last of my brain cells. I'll record a video fully explaining the BS science behind this stuff, because all in all it was hilarious. And I guess that's it. See ya.